Good morning again, everybody. If you've met me or known me for as many as 5 seconds, it's probably come up in conversation that I am an immense nerd. I just love science fiction and the world of imagination in that space so much. And there's not a topic that I can't reference the world of science fiction on. Like, prove me wrong. And in the early 2000s, I was really enamored of a show called Being Human. I think there was an American version, but I was watching the BBC version, and you may not know it. So I will let you know that it is the story of a vampire and a werewolf who decide to become roommates and share an apartment together. And when they move in, they discover that the apartment is haunted, and so they end up sharing their apartment with a ghost. Just a very, very normal, everyday experience that we've all had in life, right? You move into an apartment and you find out that you're not the only strange creature there. And it's not a perfect show, and it is very dated in that it is, a couple decades old now. And I revisited it recently and was like, I don't know that I'm experiencing this the same way that I am now, that I know a little more about the world and my learning that I've done. But I did still find that there was a great deal of meaning in its central message. And it is titled Being Human because in all of their interactions, what they're struggling to do is understand what it means to be human, and what it means to be human as entities who have been, for one reason or another, outcast from regular spaces, from the common spaces. And I want to share this quote from the show. The person speaking is Annie, who is the ghost in the show. Death was always a certainty. The punchline we could all see coming, but not for Mitchell. For a vampire, death isn't the end, but the beginning. So here we are, overlooked and forgotten, unnatural and supernatural, watching the dance from the sidelines. At least I was surrounded by friends and family. At least I got that bit right. You know the worst thing about being a ghost? It's lonely. You'll give anything for that crumb of comfort. That feel of skin against skin that says, it's okay, I'm here. It's a hunger, the most basic instinct. You might even drag others into this world of the dead, even if that means turning them into monsters too. Then there are the ones like George, the ones that should have died, but shattered and bloody they walk away from the train wreck. But what's the cost? They're scarred, transformed. They're monsters now too, aberrations, the stuff of nightmares, the big bad wolf. So, what have we to look forward to? Us refugees, the flotsam and jetsam of death. Maybe if we still deserve such a thing as mercy, we find each other. And there's a couple of things that quote made me think of in the realm of disability. And the first is the way, as our reading reference, that these systems of oppression distort our sense of self and make out people who are different to us in whatever way to be monsters. In our history, there are literal laws that we refer to as ugly laws that prevented disabled people from being present in public spaces and that required their institutionalization. And I want to begin from the get-go as I start talking on this topic to affirm that there exists in the world monstrous ideologies, there are monstrous behaviors, but there are no monstrous humans. There are no monstrous humans. And I think the inclination that we have to treat particularly disabled people as being so different, so inconvenient, so fearful, really does stem from our white supremacy culture that we live in, where what is human is defined by a subset of people with power, and that the more vulnerable you are, the further you are considered to be away from full humanity, which is a historical reality, and which is a great sadness if we are people who affirm the inherent worth and dignity of all people. I want to commend to you, first of all, the documentary Crip Camp on Netflix. Show of hands, everyone who's already seen it. If you haven't seen it, I do suggest that you take some time if you have access to Netflix. I'm not trying to advertise Netflix, that's just where I watched it, which does a really good telling of disability advocacy and disability rights in the United States, at least. It's a really good primer for this conversation. It certainly taught me a lot that I didn't know. And I think also we would do well to broaden our understanding of disability. Because sometimes when we think of the word disabled, really obvious things stand out. So if we talk about making our spaces accessible, then we talk about wheelchair ramps, right? We're not always thinking of things like hearing loops. We're not always thinking of things like, is the lighting in this space too difficult for people who are sensitive to lighting issues? We're not thinking, is this space too loud or too quiet for some people? We're not always thinking of the accessibility needs of people with invisible disabilities. Yeah, what perfume might we wear, or what deodorant might we use that might be keeping people from our physical spaces because they will react very badly to that perfume or to that odor. And beyond that, I'd like to challenge the concept that disability is something that happens to other people. I very recently encountered the term temporarily able-bodied. I didn't invent it, don't give me credit if you haven't heard it before. But it was just such a concept to me to realize that in our human experience of life, we are all at best only ever temporarily able-bodied. At some point, disability or death or both will come for us. And it tends to be that the people who care most about disability advocacy tend to be the disabled, because they are the people who have been feeling lost and lonely, who have been feeling like they just want someone to come alongside and say they are there too. The people who have survived a great struggle and now find themselves cast out from society, the people who feel both invisible and put on display. And that's certainly been my experience, because as I came to understand myself as someone who was temporarily able-bodied, that was a very quick journey from there to realizing that I am actually someone who is also disabled. So I'm not temporarily able-bodied. It's possible, but I never have been. As it turns out, I have ADHD. I've been hard of hearing for as long as I can remember. But it never occurred to me to think of those things as disabilities because of how very firmly we are enculturated to think of this means disabled, but this just means a fun quirk that I have, right? So if we are all only ever temporarily able-bodied, and that definition of what it means to be able-bodied is very arbitrary and depends on, you know, how you define what that means, then it means that accommodations that we make for each other are so important. And I want to state that I'm coming to feel like every single human in this world requires accommodations of some kind to thrive. It's just that some of our accommodations have been so normalized that we take them for granted. So some accommodations for disability are really obvious, really visible. You might need a wheelchair, you might need a walker, you might require the services of an American Sign Language translator if you are in circles where other people are not deaf as you are. Some are a lot less obvious. My daughter's not hard of hearing, but she still requires captions on TV because it helps her to catch the meaning of the shows that she's watching, because sometimes distractions occur. Does the lighting in the room that we have, just the reality that we put lamps and light bulbs in our physical spaces so that we can see when the sun goes down, is an accommodation that we make. Reading glasses are accommodations, or contact lenses. Ensuring we have access to clean drinking water is an accommodation. Ensuring we have access to and support from people in our community, from access to pets or plants if they are forms of life that are meaningful to you, are accommodations. Accommodations, I'm coming to think, is just a big word for tools we put in place to get through life, because we recognize that, as it turns out, we are human. And part of the human experience is to have need of each other and to support the needs of each other. I feel like recognizing the full humanity of each other, and crucially, recognizing the full humanity of yourself, is the key to creating a society where simply being human is more than enough. And it is how we can recognize the value of our shared lived experience. It is how we can better allocate the limited and unlimited resources of our beautiful blue boat home. It is how we can be a part of loving and caring for each other more fully, because it begins with understanding that we are human and we are human together. And that's beautiful. Amen.